The first few hours of a missing person case are the most vital. The earlier the search for someone who's disappeared begins, the easier it is to locate clues and tips that will eventually lead to them being found. These missing person cases are still early in their investigations, and new information can help bring back their loved ones quickly. Number 10. Daniela Nikuliak wasn't someone who went off without telling people where she was going. So when family and friends couldn't get a hold of her, they knew something was wrong. Despite extensive searches, the 62-year-old woman still hasn't been found. Daniela was last seen on March 12, 2026. That morning, she left her home in the St. Patrick's Square area of Thunder Bay, seemingly to go on a walk. When she didn't return home, her family began to worry, and she was reported missing that same day that she disappeared. At first, it was theorized that Daniela may have been visiting her mother, who lived on the 600 block of Lakeshore Drive. The distance would only be a short drive, but it was a lengthy walk. The police combed through CCTV footage from cameras along the routes that Daniela may have taken, and found images of her from Algoma Street at 9:30 a.m. on the day she vanished. The footage was a vital clue in the investigation, but it also left investigators with unanswered questions. Daniela was seen walking alone in a way that was described as a brisk pace. It seemed she had a destination in mind. The location was 3.5 kilometers from her home, although how long it took her to reach that point hasn't been revealed. The sighting confirmed that she had left on foot, although it's currently not possible to say that she wasn't picked up by a vehicle after this point. The footage also confirmed what Daniela was wearing at the time of her disappearance. According to the police, extensive searches had taken place from the former Lakehead Psychiatric Hospital to Centennial Park. The search effort had utilized drones, canine teams, and snow machines, as well as the OPP Emergency Response Team helicopter. The police said the area was easy to cover from the air, but it would be difficult to find someone if they were in the bushes. Daniela was described as a homebody and wasn't known for going on long walks. She didn't have a frequent walking path, making it difficult to determine where she may have been going. She left behind all of her personal belongings when she left the house, including her phone, money, and car keys. Her disappearance was extremely out of character. She's very close to her family, which includes her mother, husband, children, and grandchildren. Not long before she vanished, she went on a skiing trip with her granddaughters. She does have a health condition which requires regular medication, and she did not have this with her at the time of her disappearance. The cold weather was also concerning for her family. The police have appealed for anyone in the area to be vigilant and remain on the lookout for Daniela or any of the clothing she may have been wearing. It's possible she might have discarded items as the weather grew warmer. The police have also asked people to search home security and dashcam footage, which might help to piece together where Daniela went after she was last seen on camera. Daniela is described as being 5'4" tall, of medium build, with medium-length gray hair, brown eyes, and a gruff-sounding voice. She was last seen wearing a gray wool hat, a white fleece jacket under a black puffy jacket, black pants, gray gloves, and brown and gray boots with a white sole. Anyone with information in Daniela's case can contact the Thunder Bay Police Service at 807-684-1200. If anyone spots Daniela, they're urged to contact 911. Number 9. DeEtte Spencer vanished without a trace while traveling home from visiting family. More than 2 months on from when she was last seen, few clues have been found to explain what happened to her. DeEtte was 69 years old at the time of her disappearance in Escalante, Utah. Just a few months earlier, she'd lost her husband in a plane accident and was still getting used to living alone. More tragedy struck in early 2026, and DeEtte had another funeral to attend. Unfortunately, she would never make it there. On the journey, she accidentally locked herself out of her car in Vernal. Her son-in-law traveled to meet her and helped her get on the road again. She decided to spend a couple of days with him and her daughter in Rangeley, just over the border in Colorado. When DeEtte left, they expected she'd be making her way back home. It wasn't until days later that she realized she'd gone in the opposite direction. According to her son-in-law, Sean, he spoke with her on the phone a few days after she left. It was then that he found out she hadn't made it back home. Diette's phone ran out of life just 15 minutes after the end of the call. Diette was reported missing, and on the 30th of January, a silver alert and a nationwide attempt to locate were activated. The police couldn't use her phone to trace her movements after the final call, but they could trace her card payments as she paid for gas and grocery items. The last confirmed sighting of her was on January 26th when she was at a Walmart in the Price area of Utah. The police released CCTV images from the store, which showed Diette shopping alone. The last time her card had been used to purchase fuel was in the Grand Junction area of Colorado. That meant to get to Price, she would likely have started out on the route back home to Escalante before making a detour north, rather than carrying along the highway. At first, her family suspected she was stranded somewhere. They worried her car had become stuck in a snowbank or somewhere similar, and she was in need of assistance. Over a month after she was last seen, Diette's car was found in a remote area of Carbon County. A utility company employee had been checking wells in the area when he stumbled across the abandoned vehicle. At first, Diette's family thought this would be the end of their ordeal. Carbon County hadn't been on the search team's radar before the car was found, but now the effort was refocused to that area. It seemed unlikely Diette had gone far from her vehicle, but she was still nowhere to be found. According to her family, there are no known health conditions that could explain her disappearance. Sean told the media that when he learned she hadn't gone straight home, he wanted to interrogate her about the decision. He didn't know if she'd simply gotten lost or if she hadn't wanted to go back home to an empty house. It's possible the journey had started with Diette taking the long way home, only for her to get lost somewhere along the way. The police continue to appeal for any information about what happened to her after she was last seen. Diette is described as being 5'2" with white hair and green eyes. She was last seen driving a white 2010 Buick LeSabre with Utah license plates, which has since been found. Anyone with information can contact the Garfield County Sheriff's Office at 435-676-2678. Number 8. Pawan Gare had just started a new phase of his life when he vanished without a trace in March of 2026. He left behind no clues as to where he was going or what happened to him. Pawan was a recent PhD graduate from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and was still living in Lincoln at the time of his disappearance. He was originally from Nepal, and his family still lived there. He'd spent years studying electrical engineering and was working as a research assistant at the university. In February 2025, his dissertation on physics, embedded neural networks, was published in the journal Neurocomputing. A month later, he defended his dissertation and was granted his PhD. According to a post on LinkedIn, it was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of an exciting new one, with many possibilities opening to him. Since then, Pawan had continued his research at the university and kept in touch with his advisor. On March 16, 2026, Pawan was supposed to have a meeting with his advisor. When he never made it to the meeting, his advisor immediately knew something was wrong. It wasn't long before Pawan's loved ones realized that nobody had heard from him for days, and he hadn't been seen in person for over 2 weeks. His friends in the US contacted local authorities to report him missing. His family in Nepal contacted the US Embassy there, making the investigation an international effort. The last time Pawan had been seen in person was March 1st. He told his landlord in Nebraska that he was going away for a little while, but he intended to return in 2 weeks. At the time, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. A few days later, his car was spotted in Tennessee. The vehicle was a black Honda Civic with a skull sticker on the rear and racing stripes on the front, making it somewhat recognizable. More than a week later, on March 11th, the car was spotted again in Milton, Florida. This was the last time anyone spoke to Pawan. He called his parents in Nepal and told them he was doing well. It's not clear if this was a regular check-in that he had with his family, though. It was then another 5 days before anybody realized he was missing. It wasn't until March 24th that the police searched Pawan's apartment in Lincoln. According to reports, they found nothing of interest there, and nothing that could explain what had happened to the missing man. 3 days later, his car was located in Pensacola Beach, a popular tourist destination in the north of the state. The site is only a roughly 35-minute drive from where Pawan's car was spotted on March 11th, but it wasn't immediately clear how long it had been in Pensacola Beach. The early news reports described the car as being abandoned. Searches of the area around where the car was located, including the water, turned up no clues. Since the car was discovered, there have been no new updates in the case. Pawan's family and friends in Nepal have turned to social media to try to raise awareness for the case, with videos highlighting the timeline of events. Pawan's case is one with far more questions than answers. It's not known why he was traveling to Florida and where he was in the week between the Tennessee sighting and the Florida one, but the case is early in its investigation. Pawan was recovering from abdominal surgery at the time of his disappearance. He may be in need of medication. He's described as being 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighing 150 pounds. He has black hair and black eyes. Anyone with information in the case can contact the Nebraska Missing Persons Clearinghouse at 1-877-441-5678. Number 7. Residents of Oakland have described Amy Hilliard as an important member of the community and the sort of person that they could always go to when they were in need. Since they disappeared in March, they've rallied together to try to bring the missing woman home. Amy is the co-owner of Farley's Coffee Shops and could often be found in the Oakland branch of the cafe. She also ran her own successful consulting company and volunteered with the local children's choir. She was well known and well liked in the community, and her sudden disappearance came as a shock to all. Amy was reported missing after vanishing from her home in the area of Radnor Road on March 25, 2026. According to early reports, the last confirmed sighting of Amy came at about 2 p.m. A neighbor had spotted her walking her dog not far from her home. Later that day, Amy's husband stopped by to ask if they had seen her. Amy was now missing. She left her phone at home, and the dog was also apparently back at the house. If there were any indications in the house about where Amy may have gone, this information wasn't shared with the public. The missing person search started immediately. Amy has health conditions which the police believe put her at risk. Finding her as soon as possible became a top priority. Details of those health conditions were not shared for privacy reasons. Initially, the search focused on the area near where Amy had last been seen. Appeals were made for any sightings or potential CCTV footage that could help investigators clarify where she had gone. But a few days into the investigation, the police refocused efforts on Diamond Park. The park is located roughly a 45-minute walk from where Amy was last seen, and includes trails that are good for walking and cycling. According to locals, it wasn't the sort of place someone could easily get lost, and there were pleasant walking routes closer to Amy's home, but Diamond Park wasn't too strange of a destination for her. According to reports at the time, the police had located CCTV footage from near the park, which seemed to place Amy there at about 4:30 p.m. But later news reports on the missing person case did not highlight the sighting, and footage has not been released to the public. The search later moved further from Amy's home to Skyline Gate, over 5 miles from her home. In the latest update on the case, volunteers have begun to pour through CCTV footage from the Bay Area rapid transport stations in hopes that she may have been spotted there. The missing person case has drawn large-scale support from the community, which included 200 volunteers going door to door to ask about sightings or any camera footage that might provide clues. Vigils have also taken place, and the family have said the effort is a source of strength for them. Amy is described as being 5'4" and 120 pounds with blonde hair and hazel eyes. She was last seen wearing a short-sleeved shirt, light jeans, and white sneakers with black stripes. Anyone with information in the case should contact the Oakland Police Missing Persons Unit at 510-238-3641. Amy's loved ones have also set up a tip line, which can be reached at 510-591-4857. Number 6. Ryan Rudd was last seen celebrating a night out with friends. It took 2 weeks for him to be reported missing, and no trace of him has been found since. Ryan is a Lance Corporal in the Royal Yorkshire Regiment of the British Army. At the time of his disappearance, he was based at Catterick Garrison in North Yorkshire, about an hour's drive from the town of Selby. In mid-February, most of Ryan's unit was deployed on a training exercise, but he was part of the rear party, meaning Ryan was staying back at the garrison. On the evening of February 14th, Ryan and two friends decided to spend the night out in Selby to celebrate Valentine's Day. So far, few details about the night have been released, but it's known that Ryan was last seen at the New Inn pub. There, he was caught on CCTV in images that the police have since released to the public. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong in the images. At some point during the night, Ryan was separated from his friends. He was last seen just before 3 a.m. on February 15th, walking past a building known as the Old Flower Factory in the direction of New Millgate. Ryan wasn't on leave at the time of his disappearance, and he was expected back on duty just 24 hours after he was last seen by his fellow soldiers. But Ryan never made it back to the barracks and didn't report for duty. According to his friends, this was extremely out of character for him. There was no reason to believe he would voluntarily go away without leave, but for reasons unknown, it took 2 weeks before any alarms were raised. On March 1st, a senior member of the military reported Ryan's disappearance to the police. The search for the missing soldier began immediately as the police made urgent appeals for information. Early search efforts involved door-to-door inquiries in Selby, as well as examining CCTV footage from the night of his disappearance. So far, the police have not been able to confirm where Ryan went after going past the Old Flower Factory. There's also no public timeline of his movements on the night of his disappearance before the final sighting, or information about the condition Ryan was in when he was last seen. The initial search utilized drones to access hard-to-reach areas. The Old Flower Factory sits opposite of the River Ouse. There's a wall separating the road from the river, meaning it's unlikely that Ryan could have accidentally ended up in the water here. But he was walking in the direction of a bridge that would have taken him back to New Millgate. In an update over a month after Ryan went missing, the police confirmed they were considering the possibility that he ended up in the water. His disappearance is a case with far more questions than answers, but as people respond to appeals for information, it's possible that more pieces of the puzzle may be put together. The initial delay in reporting Ryan as a missing person is also being investigated by the military. Ryan was 28 years old at the time of his disappearance. He's described as being 5 foot 8 inches tall, of a slim build with brown hair. He was last seen wearing a black t-shirt, blue hooded jacket, and black pants. Anyone with information in Ryan's case should contact the police on 101, quoting reference number 122-600-37725. Any sightings of the missing man or information about where Ryan currently is can be reported on 999. Number 5. 3 months have passed since New Zealand farmer Kevin Belling vanished without a trace. The police say there are serious concerns about his safety, but there's little information available about his case. Kevin was 62 years old at the time of his disappearance and worked as a dairy farmer. He owns multiple properties at the southern and western tip of New Zealand. One of these was Motuarimu, an area of farmland not far from a main city. It was here that Kevin was last seen on January 9, 2026. A few days passed without any of Kevin's friends or family members hearing from him. This was very out of character for him, and they knew something wasn't right. On January 18th, Kevin was reported as missing to the police, and the investigation into his disappearance began. Extensive searches began on Kevin's properties, including on Caesar Road in Kapuka. As Kevin was last seen on his Motuarimu farm, this area soon took focus. The police made inquiries to find out more information, and search and rescue teams explored the land on foot. Drones were also used in hopes of spotting the missing farmer from the air, but no sign of Kevin could be found. A week into the investigation, the police made an appeal to the public for information. They were worried about Kevin's safety. Those local to the area were asked to search barns and outbuildings for the missing man or any signs that he'd previously been sheltering there. Despite no sign of Kevin being found, the search remained focused on the Motuarimu area. In late February, the police announced they were searching effluent ponds on the property. These are ponds used to store nutrient-rich waste from dairy farms to prevent waterway contamination. Since the announcement, there have been no new updates on the case. According to the police, there have been some potential sightings reported to the public. Unfortunately, when investigated, it turned out not to be the missing man. Kevin is still listed as a missing person on the New Zealand police website. Other than the effluent ponds, There are a few other waterways in the local area. Most of the area surrounding where Kevin went missing is farmland, making it a much different missing person case from many others. It's unlikely he would have been caught on camera in the days after his disappearance, and unless there was anybody else on his property, it's unlikely he would have been spotted by someone passing by. Despite this, it's still possible that someone may know information about the case without realizing it. This is especially the case if Kevin somehow left the Motorimu property. Anyone with information in the case can contact the New Zealand police on 105 or online through the 105 website with reference number 260118/6964. Information can also be passed on to the authorities anonymously through Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Number 4. On the morning after a snowstorm, a resident of Marquette, Michigan, went to the police to turn in a phone that they had found abandoned on a path. It wasn't until later in the day that anybody realized the person who had dropped the phone was now missing. Trenton Massey was a 21-year-old student at North Michigan University. According to family, he was very generous and always willing to help out others. He spent the night of February 21st out with friends at a bar in Marquette, which sits on the shores of Lake Superior. As was usual for Trenton, he sent his mother selfies showing him enjoying himself at the bar. His mother later shared the photos and messages where she tells him to be careful and look after himself. It's believed that Trenton left the bar in the early hours of the following morning when the establishment closed. He decided to walk back to his accommodation alone. Winters in this part of Michigan can be harsh, and the night of Trenton's disappearance was a particularly brutal one. A snowstorm had set in, making it difficult to navigate even for someone who wasn't under the influence of alcohol. A friend who'd also been on the night out later reported getting lost himself on his way home. Snow in the air and on the ground can make even a familiar place look completely different, and Trenton never made it back to his home. About 6 hours after he left the bar, Trenton's phone was turned in to the police. It had been found on a multi-use path in downtown Marquette. The police initially contacted a family member to inform them that Trenton's phone had been found. At the time, even the family didn't realize Trenton was missing, so they simply promised to pass on the message about the device. It wasn't until later in the day that they realized nobody knew where he was, and Trenton was reported missing. Surveillance footage showed Trenton walking along the same path where his phone was found at about 2:50 a.m. 45 minutes later, more footage captured him walking along Founders Landing boardwalk. Trenton stepped out onto the ice and disappeared from the camera's view. Authorities say that he appeared to be disoriented or struggling to walk in the footage, but it's impossible to say whether this was due to hypothermia or the impact of alcohol. According to his family, he was wearing a coat, but he still wasn't dressed for the weather conditions, and there appears to be snow on his clothing in the footage. The initial search for the missing student focused on the Founders Landing boardwalk area. Specialist search teams were brought in to deal with the harsh weather and difficult terrain. The search included sonar units, scuba divers, canines, and drones. Unfortunately, the efforts turned up no new information. The official search was called off after just a few days. According to the police, they had searched everywhere it was physically possible to search. The weather made the search extremely difficult. Snow continued to build in parts of the search area. At one point, the police believed they had discovered a hole in the ice, but they soon realized new holes were forming and icing back over all the time. It was impossible to spot anywhere where Trenton might have fallen into the water. Volunteers have continued to search for the missing man. The police advised that anybody taking part in searches should be mindful on private property and not go onto the ice. Trenton was last seen wearing an olive green and black coat and dark pants. Anyone with information can contact Marquette Police at 906-228-0400. Number 3. Brittany Critis Garab was in a state of distress when she ran from a moving vehicle on Long Island, New York. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. Brittany was last seen on March 20th, 2026, just after 8 p.m. According to loved ones, she was in a family member's car while they were driving in a residential area of Oyster Bay. As they reached the intersection of Ivy Street and Jordan Avenue, the car stopped at a stop sign. The driver then began to pull forward before Bethonie suddenly jumped from the vehicle and fled the scene. As she left, she threw her cell phone into some bushes, and she was reported missing not long after. Her family reports that Bethonie may have been in a state of psychosis at the time of her disappearance. She believed she was in danger and was potentially being tracked, which was why she threw her phone. Unfortunately, while she wasn't being tracked at the time, throwing away her phone meant that law enforcement couldn't use it to determine her movements after she vanished. Why she decided to flee from the vehicle has not been revealed, but CCTV and doorbell camera footage recovered from the area showed Bethonie running or standing alone. There didn't appear to be anybody following her. Law enforcement utilized drones and helicopters in the search for her. A few days after she vanished, personal belongings, including her wallet, were found in a sandy, marshy area at the end of Florence Avenue, along Oyster Bay Harbor. The area was just a 15-minute walk from where Bethonie was last seen, but it's not clear if she ran directly in that direction, or if she'd been going down the smaller side streets of that area. This new clue helped to focus search efforts, but there was no way for family members or law enforcement to know she hadn't left the area. Since the disappearance, her family have set up a Facebook page to help focus efforts on finding Bethonie. They warn that her mental state might make her particularly vulnerable. Bethonie may be especially fearful of strangers, but they advise that she's not a danger to anybody. Both the police and Bethonie's family have appealed to anybody in the Oyster area or on the border between Oyster Bay and East Norwich to check camera footage, not just of the night that she disappeared, but of the nights since. It's possible she is still in the area and is hiding from whatever or whoever she believes is after her. Her family advise she will most likely be moving in quieter times, such as early morning or late evening, and they ask residents to check sheds, garages, and under decks, and in transitional areas like the edge of shopping centers, behind stores, and at loading docks. Bethonie is 32 years old. She's 5'7" and weighs 140 pounds and has brown hair and eyes. She was last seen wearing black pants and a black jacket with a fur collar. Anyone with information on this case can contact the CUE Center tip line on 910-232-1687 or report a sighting directly to 911. Bethonie's family have also set up a GoFundMe page to raise money to support the search efforts and bring Bethonie home. Number 2. Stephanie Sparks was last seen at the caravan home in France that she shared with her husband, Ken. When Ken woke up from a nap, he discovered Stephanie was missing, leaving behind a few clues as to what happened to her. Stephanie and Ken had moved from England to France in 2012 after falling in love with the country. They settled down at a camping site in western France. The couple were well known and liked in the area and were popular with other caravanners who came to stay at the site. Despite being in their 70s, the couple remained active. They would go on long walks, trekking for 5 kilometers twice a day every day. At the end of 2025, Ken started to feel ill, which limited how much they were able to go out on their walks together. He would later be diagnosed with lung cancer. The day of Stephanie's disappearance was like any other. January 29th began with the trip to the supermarket. CCTV footage from the entrance of the campsite showed the couple leaving in their car and returning later with groceries. After they returned home, Ken went for a nap. When he woke up, Stephanie was missing. Nothing else was missing. Stephanie's phone and cards had been left behind. She also didn't have any cash with her. At first, it seemed like Stephanie might have gone for a walk alone. No CCTV footage captured her leaving the campsite, but there was a trail that led to the back of the site, which wasn't covered by any cameras. It was a trail Stephanie was familiar with, having hiked along it countless times in the past. When she didn't return home, though, it was obvious this wasn't a normal walk. The police were alerted to her disappearance, and the search for the missing woman began. Search parties walked along the potential paths Stephanie could have taken after leaving the caravan. The police attempted to utilize a canine unit to help narrow down the route, but the dogs couldn't get a clear scent. Stephanie had spent so much time in the area that it was impossible for the dogs to identify one clear path. Drones were also utilized, as well as dive teams that searched the waterways in the area. Stephanie's family first thought that she might have had a fall along the path, but as they walked and found no trace of her, the mystery only deepened. It wasn't an area where someone could slip and fall off the path, and it was unlikely Stephanie had gotten lost and disoriented unless she had some kind of medical emergency. The police looked into the possibility that she'd been planning on running away. According to her family, the disappearance was very out of character, but Stephanie would have been under a lot of stress at the time she vanished. She had children and grandchildren, but the rest of the family was based in England. She was alone in France with her sick husband. But the police could find no evidence that Stephanie had been hiding money or making plans to leave kin. There was still the possibility that this was a spontaneous decision, but the only evidence for this was the lack of any other evidence. Extensive searches in the local area turned up no clues. Neither Stephanie nor any of the clothes she was wearing at the time have been found. She's described as of a slim build and was wearing a light blue jacket, dark pants, and black or gray boots at the time of her disappearance. Anyone with information can contact the local police at 33-555-750-036. Number 1. Anatoly Ishchenko was one of thousands of refugees who traveled from Ukraine to Canada after the Russian invasion in 2022. He left behind his parents and brother and was alone in Canada. That meant when he suddenly disappeared in January of 2026, there was a delay before anybody realized he was missing. Anatoly was last seen on January 22nd, leaving a hospital in Winnipeg. He lived in the area since arriving in Canada in 2022, and he had traveled alone, leaving behind his immediate family in Ukraine. His closest relative was an aunt who had moved to California, but his status meant he couldn't travel to the US to visit her. The large Ukrainian community in Winnipeg welcomed Anatoly when he first arrived, and he made friends in his new home, including some who lived in the same apartment building. At first, things seemed to be going well. He was excited about starting his new life and was working on improving his English. He had a job at Motor Coach Industries Limited and kept in touch with friends and family. But starting about a year before his disappearance, his friends started to notice a change in his behavior. According to Serhiy Zadorozhniak, who lived nearby, he slowly became more withdrawn, and it seemed like something had happened to him. Other Ukrainian community members noted that it was often difficult for refugees to adapt to life in Canada, especially with the language barrier. Why Anatoly started this change is unknown. At first, his family didn't notice anything was wrong. He still had regular phone calls with his aunt and was still looking forward to coming and visiting her in the future. According to his aunt, he was trying to better his life and was looking to take courses to do that. But the phone calls stopped without explanation. Then, shortly before he vanished, redundancies at his place of work left Anatoly unemployed. On the morning of January 22nd, Anatoly called an ambulance after having a panic attack. He was taken to Victoria Hospital just before 10:30 a.m., only an hour later, and he was discharged without speaking to anybody. He was last seen leaving that hospital. At first, nobody realized Anatoly was missing. His landlord knew that he'd been taken to the hospital, and when he didn't return, assumed that Anatoly was staying there. When his family called and asked for him, they were informed he was in the hospital. But in early March, a letter from the hospital arrived, and it was only then that his loved ones learned he hadn't been staying there. As soon as they realized this, the search for him began. His phone had remained active until 2:30 p.m. on the day of his disappearance. The community in Winnipeg came together to organize searches for him, and a search was organized for Good Friday and drew around 100 people who were organized into teams for methodical and detailed searches of St. Vital Park, which sits near the hospital and Anatoly's home. Anatoly left behind his documents, including his passport, which were found at his apartment. He disappeared on the coldest night of the year, with temperatures reaching -30 Celsius, but the wind chill made it feel closer to -43 Celsius. If he'd not found shelter somewhere, it would have been very difficult to survive, especially as Anatoly was not even dressed for the weather. But despite this, his friends have not given up hope of finding him. Anatoly is described as benign, 6'1" with a thin build, brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information in this case can contact the Winnipeg Police Service's Missing Person Unit at 204-986-6250. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.